Hey, and welcome to the Growth Whisperers Podcast with Kevin Lawrence and Brad Giles, where everything we talk about is about building enduring great companies, companies that continue to grow and thrive as they move on for decades. And today is a bit of a special episode, 150, Brad. 150 times we've sitting here staring at each other, coming up with some good stuff to share with the audience. And that's pretty darn spectacular, I gotta say.
It's a lot. 150 consecutive weeks we've come together and spoken about this stuff. It feels pretty good, to be honest. It feels really good to just catch up, to learn from each other, and to kind of go deep on some of these subjects. It's really good.
It is. And I gotta say, as I've told you, I couldn't have done this without you. To the discipline to continue to do this. I'm a collaborator by nature, and this collaborating together in the discussion is awesome. And with collaboration comes a lot more accountability. And so when we get into words of the day, my word of the day is collaborative accountability. And it's like, you're not my boss, I'm not your boss. We collaborate, but we are accountable to each other because we want to be. And in a strong collaborative relationship, it brings the best out of us. So awesome. Congratulations on 150, and thank you for the collaborative accountability.
Well, thank you as well. I think that our personality styles complement each other, and we're both quite curious by nature, which is good. My word phrase of the day: ego is the enemy. It's a book by a guy called Ryan Halliday, probably my favorite book to recommend, and consistently year after year is the number one book that I'm kind of recommending to people. I'm rereading again at the moment, just to recalibrate, to rethink, and to reassess. And it's old Stoic wisdom, but inside every one of us is our enemy. Our enemy is not our neighbor or our business partner or our ex-husband or wife.
It's between our ears.
Is between our ears. That's exactly right. So collaboration, and I'm not going to try to stitch those together because I never have and I never will. But that's your job, Kev. Jump into that.
You did get it once. I'm not even going to try.
I bit my tongue
You know what though? Healthy collaboration can also be very good for managing an ego.
Yeah.
Healthy collaboration requires it. By the way, if you're collaborating with someone whose ego is out of control, good luck. That's a nightmare. On that track, have you read this one, Brad? Rebel Ideas.
No.
It's a really good book. I need to go back and read it again, like Ego is the Enemy.
Who's the author?
Matthew Syed.
Yep. That's for the audience who can't see the video.
Yep. It is spectacular. It is an amazing book. In many ways, it's similar to Ego is the Enemy and how ego can get in the way of good leadership. But it's not written from the ego perspective. It's awesome. I mean, we could do a whole episode for 72 hours talking about our favorite books and the best principles.
What's that title again, please?
It is Rebel Ideas, The Power of Diverse Thinking.
Awesome book. We're discussing it this week at one of our client meetings. So, hey, let's dig into the show. So basically today is, hey, I think I've got an executive that's ineffective. What do I do? and we're going to dig, you got to do something, and we're going to dig into it. And the reality is, the most important thing is that you do something, you do it now, because, executive roles are critical. And the little secret is, if you think that the executive is ineffective, they probably are, because you're their boss. So whether it's an executive or director, generally your instincts are pretty good in the role that you're in, but we got to make sure and jump. But
Brad shaking his head and shaking his hand like there's something going on. Brad, do tell.
But they probably are. But the real question is, why are they ineffective? And what do you do about it? That's the thing. They probably are. Totally agree. If your gut is often accurate, if not intuitive. We need to pay attention to that.
but don't do nothing. So many leaders are
No.
like, you know what? My last boss was an a-hole, and I don't want to be that a-hole boss. I'm never
Correct.
going to be like that. And so then they let stuff slide and slide and slide, and accountability is non-existent. And people think that you just don't care when you don't hold people accountable.
Well, you don't.
No.
You're trying to be nice, but being super nice and not giving feedback is not good in leadership. So we're going to dig into this. The key thing is you need to figure it out and get clear on what the truth is, get beyond feelings. And to quote Jim Collins' language, are they in the wrong seat, or are they in the wrong bus? Or have they not been given the right direction by their manager, which is you or me or Brad? So it's common. We hear this all the time. And the key is to figure out what the performance gap actually is, to know it. And then once you know it, to see, is it something that's fixable? And if it is fixable and can be, then the second thing most important is to take it from a secret to a solution that's being worked on with them, getting back to that collaborative piece. And for most people, as you said, Brad, the failure is this: the leader knows. They may or may not have thought about it, but they haven't had the conversation. So it's not fair to them or you. You got to get it on the table and see if you can get them back to thriving again.
Yeah, yeah. And so what are the facts, not the opinions? Because, maybe you've had a bad day. Maybe you haven't slept enough. Maybe you're not clear on your expectations. There's a whole range of things. So come back to the facts. Do they have KPIs or metrics? If they need to sell $1 million and they've sold $600,000, that's a very good fact.
Right. But if they have to sell and there's no budget or nothing to compare to, well, then it's not a fact. It's a feeling.
Exactly.
And in many cases, the expectations aren't clear. So I'll give an example. So we have this one rock star executive. They were amazing in the role they were doing in the company. The company was growing. They were growing. All kinds of awesome things happened. We opened up another division of the company in a totally different location, far away. And this person went to go run that division. And it didn't go well. Now, was it the division? Was it the person? The division, I think, had some fatal flaws. But the person also got into a role where they were an effective executive, but now they were running a full P&L. And they did not thrive. And they tried hard and was given resources. And that division, in the end, we got rid of the division. And the person came back into the core business and now is in a role where we learned more about the person in that role. And now they're in a role where they're completely thriving. It's the perfect role for them. They're back to being an A+ player. And so for them, they weren't overly effective.
Yeah.
But it required a role change. And when they made the role change, they got back into their sweet spot of doing their best work and absolutely thriving, and everyone is thrilled. And again, you make these experiments sometimes, you try stuff, but they were a good person, wrong seat.
And you briefly mentioned it before, Jim Collins, wrong seat, wrong bus. So Jim Collins says that the job of a leader is to get the right people in the right seats, doing the right things the right way. And so then he says, when we've got a problem with a key executive, are they in the wrong seat? So maybe they would thrive in another area, which was your story.
Yep.
Or are they on the wrong bus? In other words, they're just never going to fit into this company. And that's
they don't fit the culture. Yes.
That's right. And that's a part of what we're saying here. But you've got to do something. I worked with a leader and I think it was around 4 years we had this problem. We had a key executive who was a toxic A, and that's not necessarily effective. This person was a toxic A.
Not necessarily effective.
No. He got the results, right? But culturally,
for the audience, toxic A is an A performance, A on performance.
Yeah.
But toxic because they fail on culture.
Yeah.
So they get the results. The joke is they're normally in sales, but they're just a nightmare for everybody else, for many, many people in the company.
Yeah. So not necessarily ineffective, because this person was making the numbers, but
Yes.
he was like, the attrition, the number of people that had resigned was remarkable. And this CEO sat around for 4 years. And of course, I'm there saying, what's your number one concern? What are you going to do about it? How are we going to know? What's the line in the sand that this person has to cross? So my point there is, we've got to do something. We've got to do something.
Yeah. And the root of it is trying to figure out what the problem is. I've got, one executive, and this is an awesome executive. I love this guy. He was great. I think he was very good at his job, but there were some nuances to the culture of this company that he couldn't find a way to navigate. And you wouldn't say he didn't meet the culture, but he was maybe lacking a few of the things in the culture. It was a pretty intense culture. And he just, when the CEO and I were having conversations, because this guy wasn't getting the results that we needed. There was a lot of challenges, but he just wasn't wired for the dynamics of the culture. Good thinking, a lot of the right things just didn't quite fit. And he chose to move on, which was great for him. And, unfortunate in one way for the company, because he's a good person, but just generally, with the dynamics, he wouldn't have ever been able to make it. And another one where, and we see this a lot, where people's personal issues get in the way. Often, and one CEO I work with, this CEO says, "Hey, I know each of my executives is addicted to something. I just want to know what, and then I can work with it." So obviously, alcohol can be an issue, drugs can be an issue, gambling. People can get, high-strung executives have, blow off steam, and sometimes it gets in the way. And, drinking is a pretty common one that there's challenges around in our society, not just, in the boardroom. But we had one exec with a notable drinking issue, notably affecting performance, getting in the way when they were on the road traveling in particular. And the CEO, who loved this person like a father, said to the person, "I have a choice. I can fire you, or I can pay for you to go to rehab. What do you want to do?"
Yeah.
Rehab doesn't always work, but this person went to rehab, and this person had gone through a really rough patch in their life, like some really challenging things that happened, and they just over relied on alcohol, I think. And went to rehab, goes to AA, got support, bounced back into a thriving A player role, which was wonderful to see. But those personal issues, and I've seen so many of them, where they just start to be a mess, and they can't do their job, and they can't function, and they can't get things done. And most companies don't have the skills or the resources to deal with that. Obviously, we want to talk to them, point them at resources, see if we can get them some help, or they can get some help. But at some point, if people can't get it together, they're not going to be able to do their role. It was just sad. Yeah.
Last week, I was speaking with a leader about this very subject. And I said to her, look, this is going to go one of two ways. And this is not the Brad thing. Like, I've just seen this play out so many times.
Yep.
It's only going to go one of two ways. Either you're going to address this directly with the person, you're going to outline the expectations of the company and yourself as their manager, and they will then adhere to those expectations, or they will exit. The second way is that your frustrations will boil over and it will cost you money. So this feeling that this person is ineffective, those little tiny things will build and build and build until you lose steam, lose faith in the person or whatever. And you say, this person's got to go. And if that's an emotionally driven decision,
not good.
It can be very expensive.
Yeah, it can. And also ineffective. It also can be expensive financially and for your leadership, because now you look like a hot under the collar leader who didn't act professionally, and your rest of your team isn't going to respect you. Like that's a very dangerous. So let's look at some of the principles that we're talking about, and we'll share some more examples. But like the main thing here, you got a feeling, but you got to get to knowing. Feeling can be dangerous. We can be biased. We can be emotional. We can be frustrated. We got to get to knowing and really understanding this. And, as we said up front, often when this starts to be a concern, especially if it's a regular concern, generally the person usually ends up moving on. Generally, especially when it's behavior stuff. But let's go to one of the things, Brad was talking about, get back to expectations. We've done lots of things around scorecards and top grading, and go back to the initial spec for the job and what's expected, and go and make sure that, go and look at that and evaluate them against it and try and find where the blockages are. We do this a lot with CEOs.
Yeah.
What is the actual issue?
I wrote a book about it, onboarding. So if the person doesn't have a scorecard, the book that I wrote called Onboarded it outlines the importance and how to build a scorecard and how to execute and implement it. And it's unfair to have a person not understand how to succeed in the role. They might be capable and they might want to succeed, but it's unfair if we don't help them to succeed. But there could be other things that are going on, like maybe they're going through a mental health crisis themselves, a divorce, there could be any range of things. And part of that is understanding the situation. Once we've got the facts, okay, what is the real situations? Because it could be, whilst instinctually or in pure textbook style, it could say if they're ineffective, then just sack them. Well,
no.
Maybe the first thing to do is to put your arm around them, metaphorically,
right,
and to say, we're here to support you. You mentioned before, we're happy to send you to rehab. It's a really tough challenge. We want to help you get through this, but you got to have the facts to underlie that second decision.
So go back and evaluate them based on the role. And the questions that you have in your book, Brad, are they capable of succeeding in the role? Do they understand? And do they want to? I figured mental health we talked about. The other thing is, we regularly do talent reviews where we go through and look at the key executives every 90 days. Yeah. And we evaluate them. Where are they at? We answer in our system 30, 40 questions about them. And then we decide the development plan every 90 days. And that's why I'm relentless about this with the teams I work with. And we're got a 2-day meeting starting tomorrow. Tuesday, Wednesday. And this is Sunday that we're here. And in this meeting, we will spend 2 hours going through all of the key people. And I am looking to make sure that there is a mini development plan for every single key leader. Really what that is, hey, managers, do your job. Because that's what you're supposed to do every quarter. People don't. So having a discipline to make sure that happens is something that we operationalize, because then this stuff can only slip 1 or 2 or 3 quarters. So no matter what it is, the root is then, once you know what the issue is, to go and work with them, partner with them to come up with re-clarifying the expectations that must be met.
Yeah.
And then working with them on the how. What can we do to make this work, but tangible, in writing, and then following up regularly. This is not like take a magic pill and the world is good. And if it's really casual, it could be a follow-up every couple weeks, every month. And if it's really intense, you might be having a meeting every single week. But it's working with them to get back on track.
And that really comes back to those 3 questions. Are they capable of succeeding in the role? Do they understand how to succeed in the role? And do they want to succeed in the role? And if they're capable of succeeding and they want to succeed, well, that's whether or not they are is on them, and that's fine. And then that creates a different path. But if they don't understand, that's kind of on the manager, and that's the manager's job. And that's what we're really saying. If we're scoring each of those 3 out of 10, you really want to get an average of about 8 for all of these to have confidence to move forward. So a total of like 24.
Yeah. Jim Collins has a question. He has 7 questions to decide whether you're going to develop or replace. He shared one of his sessions, and we have that in episode 46. Listen to it if you want to dig in further. But one of the questions is, are they more of a window or a mirror person? And there's a lot, but the simple explanation is, when things go wrong, do they point out the window and blame, or do they look in the mirror and learn? And that one thing is a big predictor. There's a lot of them, but that's a very big predictor, because if they are always looking in the mirror and learning, we're more likely to invest in that person because they're going to get better and better. If they're a blamer, and we can't seem to get them off of that, they'll never learn, which means they'll never change. So everything that we're getting at is understanding this. And then the final thing in the model is when you work out the plan, you often need to get them help. Like we regularly, our team will go in and coach key executives we have a concern with. And I'll tell you about a head of sales. I was coaching this entrepreneur in a family business, and his head of sales was horrible. Every question I asked was like a no, no, no. I was asking like about things heads of sales would do. Anyways, long story short, one of my team started coaching this guy, and it was, we don't know if we're going to fire this guy in 3 months or not. Well, when my team member got in there, he had no direction from the CEO. And he was a guy who was working in the business, who had a great personality, so they put him in sales. No sales, he was running a sales team. No sales training, no nothing, but he was just a charming guy who go out and talk to the customers. But that was a failure of the organization. It would, and so my team member said, well, hey, what about your sales meeting? What about your goals for your sales team? What about getting out? Like, and they went through, and he's like, oh, okay, a great idea. And he was so willing and so capable. He just didn't know what he was supposed to do. And he was just playing office like other, quote, bosses did. And I mean, long story short, he got a clear plan, alignment with the CEO to what a sales leader's job actually is. And the guy's doing great. But it was the CEO's fault.
Yeah, the understand is always the leader's fault, because that's their job. That's their job, to understand, help them understand how to succeed. That's what management is.
Yes. So the idea here is that all that stuff's great. But, you can tell me as a young child that I'm not good with my times tables in mathematics and say, Kevin, go get better at your times tables. But if I don't know how to, that's not fair, right? You need to give people tools and guidance and support. So sometimes you might have to get them a coach, a mentor, send them on a course. You might need to spend an hour a day or a couple hours a week teaching, coaching, training, whatever it is. You often got to put some resource behind it to try and give it a real chance. Now, in time, you quickly see. I mean, most people have what I call the 3-week surge. You give feedback to most people. The good-hearted ones will always surge for a few weeks and do better.
Yeah.
But then they often slip back to their old ways.
Yeah.
The real thing we're looking for is the sustainable. It sticks, and you'll see over 60 to 90 days. Normally in 90 days, you can probably make the choice. Keep going.
Yep.
And we recommend you make the choice. Do we continue to invest, or do we thank them for their time?
Well, if we circle back to the headline, I have a key executive that I think is effective. What do I do? Well, the first question is, what does the scorecard tell us? Not the job description, but the scorecard. The scorecard is a lot more definitive, binary, metrics driven.
Yes.
And if you don't have a scorecard, that's kind of that's where we're saying begin with the facts, not the opinions. Your gut is probably telling you something, and that something is we need to isolate the facts, and then we need to talk about the facts and move forward. So many conversations I've had start with, okay, what's the scorecard? What is that telling us? What is the real evidence here that we can focus on, and then take action? Like, we cannot
and make sure they know.
This feeling won't go away.
No, you got to do, and it's the right thing to do to help them. I will say one other thing I've seen.
Yeah,
it's interesting, and that's also why we go back to scorecards, and we also have psychometric assessments or things to understand how the person's wired. And I remember one of the things that one of the executives was failing on in one company was assertiveness. And we go into top grading and we look at the scorecard. Assertiveness is colored red, which says that it's very difficult to change.
Yes.
We go to psychometrics and we would look at a disc, and the person had a D of 11.
What?
Yeah. And which means a D is drive or driven for results, and basically willingness to push through obstacles and or have conflict to get something done.
It's not going to change.
And at 11, you know, at 11, you're not even going to have a tough conversation with an 11-year-old, right? Never
Yeah.
mind an executive. Those people run from conflict. They just don't do it. And so at the end of the day, and it's a tough situation. It's like, well, if the assertiveness, a leadership trait, they're not able to do it, and their D is 11, like it's not even fair to them to be in that role, because executive roles require a lot of conflict.
Mm.
And that person, and it doesn't mean that, you can't make a decision based on a psychometric. But as we dug in and got the facts, we're like, how did this person end up in this job in the first place? Because the way that they're wired is not consistent with the environment that they need to thrive in.
That's brutal, isn't it?
It is. And this person was loved by everyone. And that was over a decade ago. I still have contact with that person. I really, really admire that person. They're smart and capable, but in those senior executive capabilities, the conflict and those types of the leadership in conflict, not them. I mean, so to kind of wrap this up, the idea is, as Brad did, look at, hey, you got a hunch something's not right. Get the facts, truly understand the core issues the best you can, understand what needs to happen, put together a plan, and then work with them on a plan and make sure they know there's a gap that needs to be filled. And a lot of people will appreciate it if you work with them respectfully and find a way. That's what we hope for. And we always want to, our job as leaders, the job of leaders is to develop leaders and build leaders. And we don't want to forget that in our work.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Do something. Don't
Exactly.
keep it a secret. Don't let the frustration build.
No. So, hey, thanks for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast with Brad Giles down in Perth, Australia. Kevin Lawrence here in Vancouver, Canada. We're glad you joined us. If you haven't, please subscribe. And if you want to rate it, if you liked it, let us know. Give it a good rating. That's always appreciated. For the video version, to see the video of this and see the reactions between us sometimes, which can be entertaining, YouTube, and just search the Growth Whisperers. Brad and I both have newsletters we put out every week, sharing the best things we just love to share. That's the business that we're in. And you can get Brad's and learn more about Brad and his firm at evolutionpartners.com.au. And mine is lawrenceandco.com. We're here to help. If there's something we can do to assist you, whether it's to put something on the show or to help you in your company, let us know. Have a great week.